Well, hello everybody and welcome back to another tutorial brought to you by T&S Virtual Farms. So the subject of today's tutorial is sort of linked up with the third tutorial that I put out. And the subject is going to be how to create the image file for a custom alfalfa square bale texture. So if you saw the third tutorial in that tutorial series, there was a point in the video where I showed you some image files that we were going to use, and we did use in that tutorial. But when I showed you the image files, I just glossed over the fact that, hey, I already prepared these ahead of time because I didn't want to make the tutorial too long and I didn't want to bore any of you guys. And I've had some feedback, and I've had a few people ask me, hey, can you make another tutorial and show us how you made that image file, because we are not that familiar with paint.net, or we're not really familiar with how the image files work, so could you do that for us? So that is what today's tutorial is going to be about. Now, that being said, in the making of this tutorial and the things that I'm about to show you now, I am assuming that you have already watched all three of the first tutorials. And if you haven't done that, if you just stumbled onto this video in particular, I would suggest you go back to the first video that I released, the first tutorial video that I released, and you watch them all. Because otherwise I think there's going to be points in this tutorial where you will be very confused as to what I'm talking about and what you're looking at on my screen. So that being said, I am under the assumption, and I am making the assumption, that you have watched the other three tutorials for everything that I'm about to say and show you here. Let's get to it. The first thing that we're going to do here is, on our desktop, we're going to right click and we're going to say new folder, and we're going to name this folder bale, I can spell, bale textures. Alright, and you can name this folder anything you want. You can name it Sparky, you can name it Old Yeller, it's not going to matter. If there is something that needs a specific name, I'll tell you when it needs a specific name, but this is just a folder. You can leave it as new folder, doesn't matter. We'll just stick it over here by the recycle bin. And this is going to be the folder that we're gonna work out of. Now, the second thing you're going to need to do, if you haven't already, you're going to need to go out and get you a download paint.net. And I'll put a link in the description below to where you can go and download that. Paint.net is just an image editing software. It's freeware, so you don't have to pay for it. It's a lot like Adobe Photoshop. I started out way long time ago using Adobe Photoshop, and I don't want to pay for Adobe Photoshop, and Paint.net is a pretty powerful freeware, so that's just what I've used for several years now. So if you haven't already, stop the video now, go out and get a copy of Paint.net. Alright, so now that you've got Paint.net, next thing we're going to do is we're going to go out to the mod folder, your FS19 mod folder. And I don't know where yours is. It's probably not in Data D. It's not in your D drive, because it's probably not where the game would install it originally. I don't know where your mod folder is. Hopefully you do by this point. You know where your mod folder is. If you don't, there's other videos out there and other tutorials out there on how to find it. So go out to your mod folder and we're going to look for the map that we're going to be working in, okay, and that you're adding, that goes along with the other three tutorials, that you're adding alfalfa to and to Bales 2 and all that. And for me, it happens to be Medicine Creek version 1. So we're going to open up Medicine Creek version 1, and we're going to see the two important folders in here for the time being are Bales and fill planes. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Bales, and to coincide with the third tutorial, we're going to be working with HD small square bales. Okay, so we're going to open that, and now from the third tutorial, you should have a file in there named bale alfalfa 240 diffuse. You should also have another file in there named bale alfalfa hay 240 diffuse. And again, if you don't have these in here, then go back and watch the other tutorials, because that's where you learn what these are and what they mean and why they're here. So if you don't have these alfalfa bales in this folder, or actually if you don't even have this folder in the bales folder, stop now, go back and watch the other tutorials. Alright, I'm going to stop beating that dead horse now. Really the only one in here for now that we're concerned with, we're going to make a copy of this bale alfalfa 240 underscore diffuse. We're just going to right click on it, and we're going to copy it. Now make sure you copy it. So we're going to copy it. We're going to go over here to our new bale textures folder that we made. We're going to open it up now, and we're just going to right click and paste it in there. Now you can also use Control C for copy, Control V for paste, Control X for cut, but you know, if you're not familiar with the shortcut keys, then you can always just right click on something and choose to cut, copy, and then paste it. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to back out of here, and we're going to go back to our Medicine Creek folder in our mod folder. And the next thing we're going to look in here at fill planes. So here are all the different fill planes for the image files for like windrows, for example. Potentially there could be fill planes in here for things like soybeans, so a soybean pile or a wheat pile or a corn pile. But in here is where we're going to find our alfalfa texture files that would be used in-game for the windrows. So if you mow down a field of alfalfa and you make it into a windrow, or you just have alfalfa on the ground, this texture file right here, this alfalfa diffuse, and then this texture right down here, which is the dry alfalfa diffuse, this is what paints the windrow. I don't really know another way to say it, but this is the image you see when you look at the windrow. It's this pattern. So that's what these two things are. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to find your alfalfa underscore diffuse, and again we're going to right click and we're going to copy. Make sure you copy this. You don't want to cut it. Make sure you copy it. So we'll copy that, and we'll go back to our bale texture folder that we have open here, and actually we'll put this one up here. We're done with this for now at this point, so we're just going to minimize it. So we're going to right click in here and we're going to say paste. And so now we have our bale alfalfa 240 underscore diffuse, and we have our alfalfa diffuse images in here. Okay, now notice something here. In the little pop-up window here, we have item type, date modified, and the dimensions. Now 512 by 512, that's pixel size. So this is square, you know. I mean, obviously it's square. It's not rectangular, it's square. So that's why it's 512 by 512. So it's 512 pixels wide by 512 pixels tall. Now, if you'll look over here at the Alfalfa Bale 240 diffuse, what you'll notice is this one is 1024 by 512. So in other words, it's twice as wide as it is tall. And you'll see that when we open this up in paint.net. That might make more sense. Now, some of you, when you're looking at these, it may be looking like something like this, and you're saying to yourself, well, I don't even see the picture. I don't know what you're talking about. I can't see that. Mine doesn't look like yours does. That's fine. All you have to do, if your your list of items in here, or any folder for that matter, is looking like this, it's looking like a list, go over here in the middle of your folder, right click, and say View and Large Icons. Or if that's not big enough for you, you can say View Extra Large Icons, right? So that way it's a little bit easier, so you can actually get a visual representation or a visual thumbnail of the file instead of just knowing what the file type is. So we'll go back to large icons because that's kind of what I like to work with. Let's get down to the nitty gritty now. So if you have never used paint.net before, what we'll do is, instead of just, now since I use paint.net, the image type or the item type here is already a paint.net image. It just knows. But if you haven't before and it's like a DDS file or something like that, we'll right click on it, go down here and say Open With. And we're going to say Open with Paint.net. And if you've never used Paint.net, maybe Giants Editor is your only option. Or maybe Microsoft Windows Photo Editor is your only option, whatever. So if that's the case, all you got to do is come down here and you say Choose Other App, and you'll go and you'll find, if it's not here, you'll go to More Apps, you scroll down and you just find Paint.net and just say, from now on, when I want to open this file, use Paint.net. Okay. So here is our file, right? Here is our Bale Alfalfa 240 _ diffuse. And in game right now, when we bale an alfalfa bale, the bale looks like this, which is exactly what the in-game grass file looks like. But that's what we want to change. We want to make our alfalfa bale, we want to create the image file to apply to our alfalfa bale, which is what the third tutorial is all about. We got to create that image file so that we can make our alfalfa bales look different in game than our grass bales. That's what we're going to do here. All right, now if you'll notice down here at the bottom, look down here at the bottom with me. Remember when we looked at it before, our image file was 124 by 500 or 1024 by 512 pixels. That's denoted right down here. Okay. Now, what this number over here denotes is where your cursor is on the screen. All right, if you'll notice as I move my cursor, those numbers change. Also, if we go up here to the top left and click on this dark blue cursor, we're going to click on that, right? Now, let's go over here and let's click on this right here. Now, if you'll notice down here in the bottom left corner, it says section top left at 0, 0. This right up here, this is the 0, 0 point, this top left corner. So later on, when we start talking about where our images are in this box, this is what I'm going to be referencing to. When we start putting other images on top of this one, the top left corner, or the designated corner, when we start rotating things, you're always going to be able to find out where that corner is in this coordinate system by looking down here and seeing where that corner is. That's basically the identifier of the location, is this corner up here. Now, the bounding rectangular size, again, it's just the size of this image file, and it is, again, 1024 by 512. And this just gives you the area of this thing. If you multiplied 1024 by 512, you'd come up with this many pixels. That's all it is. All right. So another thing that's very, very important, and if you don't understand how it works in Paint.net or Photoshop, it's very similar in Photoshop, same way. Layers. You have different layers, and if you don't understand how layers work, you will want to throw your computer out the window and then run it over with your truck. Because if you don't understand what layer you're working on, what layer you want to be working on, what layer's on top, what layer's on bottom, things will be very confusing. You'll try to edit certain steps that we're going to go through, and it's not going to work, and you're frustrated. So it's very, very important that if something is not acting, not behaving the way you think it should, look at your layers. And that's going to become more apparent here in a couple of minutes. So, this is the only layer that we currently have. It's over here, and it's just by default called the background layer. Okay, and if you open up Paint.net and this is not here, you're saying to yourself, dude, there's no layers box, there's no layers window over here. How do I find that? Because it's not there. Well, right up here. Okay, now we can close all these boxes. Like so, you may have been thinking to yourself before, dude, there's no dark blue arrow. Like, what are you talking about? Right up here. That's where you turn all these things on. So we can click this. Our toolbar shows up over here. Okay. We can click this. Our history. So if we want to undo something, if we mess something up, this is where our history box is. Our layers box. You turn it on up here. Our color palette. You turn it on up here. Okay, so if something happens and one of these gets closed by accident or whatever, this is where you turn them on. Don't freak out. It's going to be okay. Just come back up here and make sure it's turned on, and you'll be good. All right. I know this is slow. I know this is probably boring a lot of you, but again, for those who are not familiar with Paint.net or not familiar with image editing at all, I want to be slow and somewhat precise, because this program and learning how to do this stuff can be very, very frustrating if you have no idea what you're doing to start with. Okay, so now that we have this, let me explain what we're looking at a little bit here. So you know what a square bale looks like in the game, all right? It's rectangular, cubic, right? It's a 3D rectangle. Now, what we're looking at here in this file, this is think about the square bale as a Christmas present, right, or a birthday present. It's a box that's got wrapping paper on it. Okay. This is the wrapping paper for the box. Look at this right here. Look at this rectangle that I'm drawing with my cursor. That is the top of the bale. See these gray lines? That's the twine or the wire or whatever it is that's tying the bale, okay? So imagine with me, this is the top of the bale right here. This lower rectangle here is the bottom of the bale, because you know both sides of the hay bale in game have got the twine or the wire on them, right? So you got to have two sides on the wrapping paper. Now this over here, you can't, it's a little harder to see, but right here there's a dividing line, and on this half of the dividing line that runs right through here, on this half, is the left half of the bale. For instance, I don't know if it's left or right, but it's one or the other. This is the left half of the bale. From roughly this point here to roughly this point over here, this area in here, then this would be the right half of the bale. Okay? So do you see how this is kind of the wrapping paper that the game engine wraps the bale in? So if we want the bale to look different, all we got to do is change the pattern on the wrapping paper, and the bale is going to look different in game if we've done it correctly. Now this over here, this is another interesting part. If you look closely at the bales in the game, there are certain areas, and predominantly it's either the edge of the bale or where the twine or the wire is. There's like some fringe. It's like some lace. It's like some three-dimensional. It makes the bale in the game not look like a perfect box. Okay, and that's what this is over here. So, that being said, I hope you understand a little bit better now of what you are looking at here. We are not going to reinvent the wheel here, okay? We're just painting the wheel a different color. So, what color are we going to paint the wheel? How are we going to paint this wheel? And I'll be honest with you, my first thought when I went out and I decided, yep, I want to do this, because in game I want to know, I want to be able from a distance when they're stacked in the barn, which one's the grass bale and which one's the alfalfa bale. I don't want to have to walk up and get close enough for the game to tell me that it's an alfalfa bale or it's a hay bale. I want to be able to look in the field or in the barn and say, yep, those are grass bales, yep, those are alfalfa bales. My original thought was, I'm going to go out to the internet, I'm going to find a really good picture of an alfalfa bale, and that is going to be my basis for changing this wrapping paper. Well, I tried that and I never could find a photograph that I felt like was good enough and that I would be usable to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish here. So I started thinking about, okay, well, what else can I use? How can I change this? How can I use something that's easy to make it look like alfalfa in the game? And I got to thinking, well, you know what? I can take the fill plane image that's already in the game from the windrow, and I can probably edit that in some different ways and use that to create the texture image for my square bales. And so that's what we're going to do now. Since I've already explained what some of this stuff is, we're going to get into the actual making of the texture image, the texture image. So what we're going to do here is we are going to go back to our bale textures folder that we made, and we're going to open this alfalfa diffuse. And again, we're going to open it in paint.net. So like you can just, by this time you should be able to just double click it. Alright, so here is the alfalfa diffuse image in paint.net, and you'll notice down here that it's 512 by 512. It's a perfect square. Alright. Another nice thing about using this in particular for this project is that it already works well for the size of our bale here, because this image needs to stay 1024 by 512. So the fact that this image is just half the size of this image, it makes it handy. It makes it easier to work with. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to click on this, and we're going to hold down Control, and we're going to say copy. So we're going to hold down Control and hit C. Now we're going to go back over here. We're going to click here, and we're going to hold down Control, and we're going to hit V. Well, let's back up. Let's back up. How do we back up? Well, the way we back up is we go right up here to this blue arrow that says undo, and we undo. So now it's gone. Before we do that, before we copy that texture into this file that we're using here, before we do that, we need to create another layer. So to do that, we'll go right down here to this little box with the plus sign on it that says add a new layer. We're going to add a new layer. We want to name this layer so we know which layer we're talking about later. So we're going to double click in the box here, double click, and this is going to pop up. And I'm going to call this forage. We're going to call this forage, and we'll just, all this stuff can say the same, just say okay. Alright, so now we have a background layer and we have a forage layer. So making sure that forage layer is blue, it's highlighted. So when I say highlighted, if you click on it, if background is blue, it means it's highlighted. If forage is blue, that means it's highlighted. So now we are working on the forage layer. Alright? And just, if that doesn't make sense yet, hang with me, it will in a minute. Now let's go back over here and we're going to just recopy this. So Control C, and we'll come back over here making sure that forage is highlighted, and we're going to Control V. Now if you'll notice, you have a little preview of what your layer looks like. So our background layer looks like what we started with, our grass bale. And our forage layer, half of it, the left half of it is green, and the right half of it is this white and gray check. What the white and gray check represents, and this white and gray check is the same thing that this white and gray check along the edge here represents. They represent the same thing, and that is that it's translucent. So in other words, there is no, behind these little blades of grass right here, there is no color. Okay, it's not white, it's not black, it's not green, it's totally transparent. That's what the white and the gray checkerboard represents. Let me show you something and follow me here. Now this is the reason why layers are important. If I go over here, right now I have the forage layer highlighted and it's on top. So in other words, it's at the top of the list. If I click on the background, the highlight changes to background, but this, for the most part, still stays the same, right? We see this alfalfa diffuse image on top, and our grass image is below. Now, follow me here and watch what I do. We have the background highlighted, this little arrow down here. Click it. The box with the up arrow, click this. Look what happened, okay? Our background image is now on top. And where did our forage image go? It disappeared. Where'd it go? Like, what just happened? One minute it's there, the next minute it's gone. Where did it go? Did I just lose everything? Oh my gosh, what's going on? No, relax. You didn't lose everything. It's just that the forage layer is now underneath the background layer. So, if we click on the forage layer, even though we've clicked on it, even though it's selected, we still can't see it because the background layer is still on top of the forage layer. So how do we move it back? Come down here to the box with the up arrow. Click it. There is our forage layer again. Okay? That is the reason why I said earlier that if you don't understand how these layers work and how to manipulate them, it's going to lead to a lot of frustration because you may accidentally click and select a different layer or move something up or whatever, and all of a sudden you're thinking, I've just lost all of my work. You really haven't. You just got to understand how these different layers work. And later on, it's beginning to become apparent why it's nice to work in different layers when you're doing something like this. Okay, so my rant about layers is over. If you have questions, you know, rewind and watch that part again. All right, so we still have our dark blue arrow highlighted here. And so what we're going to do here with this texture, and now if you've seen the third tutorial, which by now I hope you have, what we're making here is not going to end up being exactly like the image file that I used in the third tutorial. Because to be honest with you, it would be extremely difficult now for me to go back and replicate that exactly. I couldn't even do it. I could get close, but I couldn't do it completely. But what you're about to see is the steps that I went through to create that image. And actually, going back and preparing for this tutorial, I found several different shortcuts or several different little things that actually make it easier to make this image file than when I made it before. Okay, everybody. Now, what we are going to do is we're going to go about shrinking and stretching our alfalfa underscore diffuse image that we have here below my cursor to make our square bale hopefully look a little more like a real square bale. Okay, but first of all, if you'll notice, I'm on the forged layer, but when I click the image, and if you can move this around so you can see that we're just we have the square alfalfa underscore diffuse image selected, but as you can see, it is the image size is 1024 by 512, which is not what we want. And due to what I would consider some limitations of Paint.net, not a big deal, but we cannot, or at least I have not discovered how to resize this image once it has taken the size of the canvas. So the easiest thing to do for us at this point, since we want to just be able to select the square itself, is we're just going to push delete and we're going to get rid of that. Now, it's no big deal because all we got to do is make sure that our forged layer is selected. We're going to go back to this image up here, and to do that, all you got to do is come up here and click on it. You just click back and forth. So we're going to come here, select it. Again, we're going to hold down Control, and we're going to push C to copy. We'll come back over here, click our image, and again, make sure that we're on forged layer, and just hit Control V, and it puts it right back there. So no big deal. And now you'll notice that the dotted line is only around the square. Okay, now here is where the fact that these are nice square and rectangular images, and this alfalfa diffuse image is exactly half of our background image. This is where it comes in handy, because it's really easy to scale these, and it's easy to do the calculations for when we go to scale these. And I'll show you now what I'm talking about. So if you go and look at a square bale in real life, and the way a small square baler works, and even a large square baler, any kind of square baler, the way it works is it accumulates a certain amount of hay or straw or whatever it is, and then a plunger moves and it compresses presses that amount of hay. So actually what you end up with, if you've never cut apart a square bale, what you end up with are like flakes. So they're square flakes that you can easily just break off and separate. It's really handy when you're feeding animals like horses and small animals, because you can just snip the twine or snip the wire, and you can just pull off however many flakes you need, and the rest of the bale stays somewhat compressed. So in order to replicate that, what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to resize it down. And in order to do that, all you got to do is grab this little box with the arrows on it, and you're just going to click that and hold. And if you'll notice, when you do that, your little hand icon, you can see the little fingers grip on it. Okay, so now what we're going to do, no, I take that back. That's not what we're going to do. So just go up here, hit undo. What we're going to do to resize it is we're gonna grab the little dot on the corner here, and that allows us to resize our image. You know, we can stretch it out and make it big, we can compress it and make it small, and that's what we're going to do. So if you'll notice now also, look down in the bottom left hand corner of your screen, or of my screen, and as you move this around, it will tell you what the size of the rectangle is. You know, so right now it's 201 by 437. That's what size this rectangle is. It'll tell you the area of it, which changes, you know, when the height and width changes. And right now the selection top left is still at 0, 0. So what we're going to do here is we're going to resize this thing so that we have an equal amount of squares, or rectangles, it's going to be a rectangle, from this edge of the image over to right about here where the top and bottom of the bale end. And in order to do that, the size that we're going to need, the width that we're going to need is 125 pixels. And so that 125 pixels is going to show up right here where this 141 is. It actually needs to change to a 125. And as far as the height goes, we're going to make the height of this roughly right down the middle of this area right here where you can see my cursor, because this is the division between the top part of the bale and the bottom part of the bale. Okay, so we'll just grab this corner again, and it can be kind of hard to get, you know, your width exact. It can be difficult. You know, you can move your mouse really slow, but still it's kind of hard to get it sometimes. So here's a trick, and you can't see this on my screen, but while you're holding your left mouse button down, while you have the corner grabbed here, you can actually use your arrow keys on your keyboard to move that around and to resize and make it bigger or smaller. So see, I'm clicking my right arrow and it's getting wider. I'm clicking my left arrow and it's getting smaller. So when we're finished, we want this to be 125 wide, and we want it to be 256 high. So right there. And this is going to end up, this is exactly 1/5 of the length. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these, and it's going to make up the full length of the bale in game. So now what we need to do here is, while this is selected, once again we're going to hold down Control, we're going to press C on the keyboard, and then immediately we're going to press V again. And now it looks like nothing has happened, but if you click and hold and drag, what you're actually going to see is we do in fact have 2 now. It just, when we pasted it directly on top of the other one, so it looked like there was still 1. Okay, so here we go. Again, what we're going to do is we're going to move our, we're going to use our keyboard, directional arrows to move this around. And I was wrong. You don't have to keep hold of the corner with your mouse. You can just move it around. So we are going to now down here is where this section top left comes in handy, because right now you'll see that and again this coordinate address, so to speak, is referenced to do this top left dot right here. It's the top left corner of the image we have selected. So what we'll do is we'll just move to the left to 125. We're going to move up to 1, or we're going to move up 1 to 0. And so now it's exactly next to our original. Okay, and so what we'll do is we'll hold down Control, hit C again, and hit V again, and now we have another one. And we can just move it over and keep doing that until we have the whole thing filled up. So we'll do it again, Control C, Control V, scoot it over, about right there. One more time, Control V, or Control C, Control V, scoot it all the way over, and now we have the top of our bale is now looks like alfalfa instead of the original grass. So now what we got to do is we got to do the same thing we did up here. We just got to do it down here. So again, Control C, Control V, and I'm just going to grab with my mouse and drag it down here to make it faster. And now we need this coordinate position right here. It's going to read 256 and 0, and that will put it in the corner right here. So, and the thing about it is it you know, really all you need to do is just make sure that this grass is covered up. You know, if it takes you more than 5, if you're not exact, that's okay. Now, the one thing you do want to make sure you do is make sure there's no gaps. So, in other words, if we Control C, Control V, and we make another one, we don't want there to be a gap. So that's kind of exaggerated, but if you're not careful, you can kind of get something that looks more like that. And it may look pretty close now, but once you get in game, it'll be noticeable. So that's one thing you got to make sure that you get it. You get all the gaps covered, and that's pretty easy to do because down here you can just look exactly where you're at. Well, this needs to be 125, so we'll give it one more click, and we're there. So again, Control C, Control V, move this over. Now it's going to need to read 250 to be in the right spot, so just scoot it over till it's 250. Control C, Control V, scoot the next one over until it is 375. Right there. Control C, Control V, and we'll put the last one in place. Should be right there at 500. All right, so now we got the top and the bottom of our bale looking like alfalfa. And now the next thing we got to do is we have to make the sides of our bale look like alfalfa. And in order to do that, it's the same sort of process, only we're going to be working up and down. So we're going to Control C, Control V, and we're going to move this up here out of the way so we can see what we're working with. And we're going to rotate this thing. And the way we rotate it is we move our mouse to where you see the arrows that are they're kind of pointed, or the arrows are kind of curved, and you're going to hold and just drag it around. And now down here in the bottom left, you'll see where it says angle. And so we'll just move that around until we hit 90 or negative 90. And again, you can use your arrows to get it exactly. I'm using my arrows here to get it exactly 90, and then we'll just let it go. Now here we got to shrink this thing down even further, because if you'll notice, our dividing line between one side of our bale and the other side of our bale is about right here. This one's not quite as easy to see, but it's about right here. So we need this rectangle to be about from here over. So we're going to have to reduce this size even further. But that's not a big deal, because I already have the size that it needs to be, and it's going to need to be 162 pixels wide. So we're going to grab right here, and we're going to shrink until the front number down here and the left, or the 185 becomes a 162. So we'll just shrink this down until it becomes 162. There's 162. And then I made my rectangles for this part. I made them 64 pixels wide. So now we can just move this. We can just use our arrows to make it 64 wide. And again, if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say 162 wide and 64 tall, I'm talking about this right down here. So right down here where my cursor is, this is where you can see how big your selection is currently. That way you can get your size exactly for whatever size you want to make them. Okay, so now again we're just going to take this and we're going to get it over here, and now that your top corner is going to be let's see here, it's actually going to be 662 is where your top corner is going to be. So this is going to need to read 600 and not 62. It's going to need to read about 626. It's going to need to read 626. So that's going to read 626. This is going to read 626 roughly, and this is going to be 0 again. And you know, if it's like 625, or you know, it's probably not going to matter that much. You just got to make sure that there's no, you know, large gaps. Again, Control C, Control V, scoot it down, and just make sure there's no gaps, no big gaps. About right there. Control C, Control V, move it down, make sure there's no gaps. And again, what I'm trying to do here by making these small and overlapping them is give it the give the finished bales in the game the look of a real square bale that has flakes. That's why I'm not just using one big image and just stretching the whole thing across, because I want it to resemble a real square bale as closely as possible. So it's about right. And at this point, I'm not really going off the coordinate system. I'm just kind of making sure everything's covered. And this is, you know, you guys can do it however you want to do. I'm not saying this is the only way, You can make these bales or these images if you want to make them some other way. That's perfectly fine. I'm not saying this is the only way you can do it. I'm not saying that this is the best way to do it. This is just the way that has worked for me. And now before we do this bottommost part here, we're gonna work on this side over here. So again, the top needs to be 0, so there, and the side we just want to make sure it's completely covered, which right about there. Control C, Control V, and we're just gonna stack these up. Now, my bales in game, I got a little bit fancy, and I made these little rectangles that we're putting in now. I actually made them curved. That's a little bit harder, and that takes it's kind of beyond the scope of this tutorial. It's a bit more complicated to be able to do that, and if you guys wanna go on and broaden your skill set and look at some other tutorials and figure out how to do that, more power to you. But I'm just kind of getting you the basics. Okay. Now come to the bottom, and we'll just move this down, get this one these last two in here, I guess. Control C, Control V. We'll just scoot this one across. And I think we are done. So now we have the top and bottom of our bale with an alfalfa texture, and we have the both sides of our bale with the alfalfa texture. So now it might not be a bad idea, since I don't think we've done it yet, is to go ahead and save this. So just go up here and hit save. Alright, and now this part that's coming up next, I'm going to show you the easiest way to do it. This is not the way I did it when I made my textures before, but again, the way I changed this in the textures that I made for tutorial 3 was a lot more involved and a lot more complicated, and this will just be an easier route to get these colors to match our new alfalfa colors a little bit easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and we want to select our background. Okay, so we're done with the forage for now. We're going to select our background. And with our background selected, we are going to change the color of our little blades of grass right here and make them darker. So in order to do that, we're going to go up here and we're going to go to adjustments, and we're going to come down to I believe it's hue and saturation. Yes, it's hue and saturation. So we're going to change these sliders until we're happy with the color of our blades of grass over here. And that's not doing it because I don't have something selected correctly. Okay, we're going to hit cancel, and this is still selected, so we need to deselect that. In order to do that, we're going to come up here to this little X with that's on the blue square and hit that. So now that's deselected, and now we can select our background image. Okay, so do that first. Now come back to adjustments. Now come to hue and saturation, and when we move this, yes, see how over there on the right that's changing color? Goes all the way from a dark purple all the way up to all the way back to a dark purple. So we're just going to slide this around until we're satisfied that our blades of grass match the green tones of the rest of our alfalfa. So I'm thinking we're getting pretty close, like right around in here somewhere. So if you guys want to follow along with me right here, all you got to do is, you don't have to touch saturation or the lightness. All you got to do is make the hue a 17, and that will get you, I'd say, pretty darn close. All right, so now we've got our alfalfa texture on our bale, or our alfalfa image on our bale. The only thing that we have left to do, and we'll go ahead and we'll save that again. The only thing that we have left to do now is, if you'll notice, what we're missing here is we're missing the wire or the twine, depending on what baler it is, or whatever kind of baler you want it to be, or if you want it to be twine, you want it to be wire, whatever, we're missing that. So we need to get that back on here, or else our bale is going to look funny and it's going to look like it's not tied with anything. So to do that, we're gonna leave our background selected, and we're gonna go down here and we're gonna move the layer up. And remember, to do that, we come down to this little blue square with the arrow that's pointing up, and we move our layer up. So now we can see it, right? Okay. And I'm going to show you in a second why we need to see it. The next thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to create another layer. So we come down here to the blue square with the plus, and we say add new layer. And we're going to double click on here next to layer 3. We're going to go open up the layer properties, and we're going to rename it. And we're just going to call it, I don't know, we'll call it Kai. Hit OK, and so now we have a layer that's called tie. We want to leave this layer selected because that's the layer that we want to work on. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in a little bit to make this easier. And so right down here you can zoom in. Right now we're at 100%, and we'll zoom in to, we'll zoom in to 200% to start with, at least, because we want to be able to really see these lines, so we can replicate our wire. And I'm going to do wire. So we're going to work on 1/2 at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. And you can scroll. You can use your scroll wheel on your mouse, or you can come over here and use your scroll bar to move back and forth. Same thing down here on the bottom. Okay, right about there should be good. Okay, now you see this little fuzzy line that's right here? It's kind of fuzzy through here. Okay, that's the division line between the top and the bottom of the bale. So if we count up, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have six wires on this bale, okay, or 6 pieces of twine. Well, I don't want that many. I'm making this for, let's say I'm making this for an older baler, or, you know, the balers in my area, they just don't use that much. They just don't use that much twine. You know, they don't have that many tie points. I only want 2. So we're going to make 2. We're going to make 2 wires that come across here on our bale. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to come over here and we're going to use this paintbrush tool. So we'll highlight that. And now we need to select which brush width we need. And now, if, like, just looking at the cursor here, it's become a cross, or a plus sign, and you can't actually tell what the brush width is because it's a 2. Now, if we increase this to, say, I don't know, a 20 or 21, now you can see what the circle of our brush width is going to be. Okay, my tying material is going to be wire. So I'm going to come right over here, and here is where you select what color you want to use. Now, if you have, let's say you have a poly tie, you might want it to be yellow, you might want it to be orange, you might want it to be red. What I'm going to replicate here is wire, so I want mine to be gray. And you know, you can click anywhere on this color palette to make any custom color that you want. It's infinite the different colors you can select. But just for basic colors and presets, you can just click one of these squares and it makes it easy. So I'm gonna use gray. My primary color here is gonna be gray, and I don't want my if I started off now and I just clicked once, well, that's how big my wire is going to be, and I don't want that. Obviously it's too big. So we're going to go back here and we're going to say, let's see what three looks like. I think 3 is going to be good. And I want one of my wires to be the second one in. So we're gonna retrace over this line right here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go all over here to the corner, and we're just gonna get close to the middle of this line, go all the way over here to this side, and like you click your left mouse button and you drag to make it to make your line, right? Well, if you do this freehand, you can see how, man, you can really try hard and you can sort of get it straight, but it's never going to be perfectly straight. So we're not going to do it freehand. We're going to undo that. We're going to line our cursor back up where we want it. And to do that, we're going to go back to the arrow keys. So we're going to get it over here. We're going to hold down the left mouse button, so we're going to paint. And then we're going to use the arrow key to just go straight across. And we're going to go straight across all the way over to about right here, because that's where the top of the bale stops and the side of the bale starts. So you can see where the end of these tie lines stop right here, and where it's kind of fuzzy down through here. So that's the division line between the top and bottom of the bale and the side of the bale. Okay, so there's one wire, and so we're gonna go, like, this is the closest to the edge. We're gonna go to this one right here, and we're gonna do the same thing. We're just gonna go right here, and we're gonna hold down our left mouse button, and we're just gonna use our arrow to go straight across, and about right there. Good. Okay, so now we've got the top half of our bale, the new wires created. So we're just going to go down here and we're going to do the same thing for the bottom half of our bale. So here's the division line. We're going to count 1 and 2. So I want to trace over this one. We're going to go to the edge, hold down the left mouse button, and just use our arrow to go straight across. I actually think that one I could have started down a little bit, so I'm just going to say undo. I'm going to try it again. We'll start a little bit lower, maybe right there. Go straight across with my arrow key, and we're going to call that good. The original one wasn't real straight, so we'll call that good. Okay, now we're going to go down here. We're going to go second one in from the edge, and we're going to start about maybe right there. We're just going to go straight across to this other edge with the arrow key. There, now we're done. And we can zoom back out and we'll see our whole bale again. And now you're probably saying, well, man, that's all well and good, but we didn't draw our wire lines on our alfalfa image. They're on the grass image, so it's not going to help. I mean, that's not going to do any good. Well, that's the beauty of working in different layers, because we have it on a different layer. So that means we can come down here and select our forage. We'll select that, and we're going to go in here and we're going to move the layer up. How about that? Now we have our tie layer on top, so our wire lines are showing. The next layer is our forage layer, so that gives our alfalfa texture on our top and our bottom and our two sides. And on the bottom, we still have our background, which is taking care of our bale fringe over here. So, I mean, now we have a basic custom alfalfa bale texture. And you know, now that you have some basic skills, which is all I've given you, the sky's really the limit. I mean, if you don't want to use this this alfalfa diffuse texture for your bale, your base bale texture, go use whatever you want to do. Use whatever you want to use. If you find something you like from the internet, um, you can resize it and use it. I've shown you how to draw your different tie lines. Like I said, if you want them a different color, if you want them a different size, if you want to freehand them so they're not perfectly straight, get after it. You have basic tools now so that you can do that. We're going to save this one last time. We're going to save this. We're going to save this dot PDN, which is paint.net. We're going to save that one more time. And now this next part is pretty important. The file type that you need to save this to use in the game is actually a .png. And what a .png does is it maintains this transparent white and gray check over here. So in other words, the image behind these blades of grass is clear. And if you don't save it as a .png, they won't be clear. It'll be black or it'll be a different color, and your bales are going to look weird in game because it's not going to look like fringe or you know, little pieces of grass like it's supposed to. It's going to look like a band of grass with black behind it. So that's the reason why we need to save this as a PNG. So all we're going to do, go up here to File, Save As, and we're going to leave it the exact same name. We're not going to change the name, but we're going to say Save As Type, and we're going to go find PNG, which is the next one on the list, as the file type. So we're going to select that. So now you see it disappears because we don't have any other PNGs in there at the moment. And we're going to hit save. And this is going to come up, and you don't need to change anything here. All you got to do is say OK. It's going to say, oh, by saving in this file format, it requires that the image is flattened first, which reduces it to a single layer. And that's perfectly fine because we have our layers in the correct order so that everything looks as it should. We can see our wire ties, we can see our alfalfa texture, we can see our fringe on the edge. So it's perfectly fine at this point that it gets flattened. So we're going to say flatten. So now you can see here that our other two layers disappeared and we only have one layer that we're working with. At this point, this is basically, not basically, this is your finished custom bale texture for your alfalfa bale. Okay, so now if we go over to our bale texture folder, what we have now is we have our alfalfa diffuse, which came from our fill type folder in our mod map folder. We have the original alfalfa bale texture that we started with. That was actually just the vanilla game grass texture. Now we have our custom bale texture, but notice the type here is the paint.net image, and that's important because if we ever decide that no, we don't really like this, we want to make a change to this, well, it's going to be pretty hard to do that if the only file type you have is a PNG, because a PNG is only one layer. So let's say we decide, let's save this and close it out. We do not want to save this because we haven't actually changed anything. So we're just going to say don't save. So let's say now I decide, you know what, I really like this bale, but I don't want to use wire. I want to use poly tie instead, and poly tie is a color other than gray. Well, I open up my PNG and paint.net. Open with paint.net, and I say, oh man, I can't. This is going to be harder this is going to be harder to move around. It's going to be harder to work with. Oh, you know, I really wanted to change this instead of a 2-wire tie. I wanted to change it to a 3 poly tie. So have 3 lines on each side of or each top and bottom of the bale. So instead of a total of 4, I'd have a total of 6. Oh, but that's going to be hard now because, oh, what do I do? Well, you don't work on your diffuse.png. No. You just close that and don't worry about it. You go back to your bale alfalfa diffuse paint.net image. Just open with paint.net. And now, because you still have your layers in this file type, it's really easy to change because you can just select your tie layer and you can go to town and you can change whatever you want to change. Because, you know, if you have your tie layer, you should be able to, I'll make myself a liar here, but if you have your tie layer and you have it selected, you can take your eraser right here. Look at that, we can just erase that. Let's make our brush width wider so it doesn't take us all day long. Check this out. Because we're working on different layers, we can just erase that dude. Yep, just erase that. We can move we can deselect. We can move our background back up 1 layer. So we have our lines to retrace again. And we can change it to whatever we want to change because we still have the layers over here in this paint.net PDN file format. So that's the end of the tutorial. We're going to close that and we're going to say don't save. That's the end, guys. Now you can go back to the 3rd tutorial and you will have a custom alfalfa bale texture to use for your bales. That's how I did it. Now this is the bale custom bale texture for the alfalfa bale. Okay, so remember over here in our bales folder in our map. Remember now, we have a custom bale texture for our bale alfalfa diffuse. Well, we're going to have one in just a second whenever we take this one, and this is a paint.net image, and remember if we open this one, it's going to have this is going to be the old grass. It's going to be the old grass one that we made from before. We just kind of copied it and renamed it. This is covered in the 3rd tutorial, but we'll take that, and this is the one that we will replace. We'll delete that out. We'll copy our PDN or our PNG file here. We'll just Control C that and Control V it over here, and now we have our custom alfalfa bale texture. But you still have to go back and make your bale alfalfa hay custom texture image. And really, for me, the only difference between the bale alfalfa custom image and the bale alfalfa hay custom image is just the color. The alfalfa hay custom image is just going to be a little bit lighter. That's it. So guys, I know this tutorial has been very long. I know I have dumbed down some of these things way down. I know that there's probably some dead horses that I've beat over and over and over again, but like I said, there was a handful of people who were really very interested and very persistent on learning how to do this, and I have to assume that those folks who are very interested in doing this have no idea how to use paint.net. They have no idea really what they're doing at all. And so I have to take all the appropriate steps to try to help them get this done without struggling too much, because trust me, most of what I have learned, most of what I've covered in these tutorials that I've made has been a struggle, and some of the stuff I've spent hours upon hours upon hours trying to figure out how to do. And the whole reason why I made these tutorials is so that I could help folks accomplish these things and not ride the struggle bus the entire time. So if you've enjoyed this tutorial, if it's helped, please give it a thumbs up. If you are interested in farming simulator roleplay videos, please check out my Washita Valley Farms series. It's a fun series about a young man who wants to get into farming, and it's just sort of all the different farming jobs and all the different people in his community that he interacts with. So if you're interested in that, go check me out. I release a new video in that series every other Friday, and they're usually about 20 minutes to a half an hour long. So thanks again. I hope this helps. One other thing, I'll put a link to my Discord down in the description of this video. I'm not on Discord all the time, but if you want to hit me up and if you have questions about this or another tutorial or whatever, that's probably the best place to reach me for this kind of thing. You can hit me up initially in the comments below. That'd be great. But then we'll probably take it offline from YouTube and discuss it further in Discord. So let me know what you think. I hope this helped, and we'll see you guys.